The London society pages of the Times and Tatler called her the Dollar Duchess. But in the private, gaslit drawing rooms of Mayfair, her name was poison. Seraphina Monroe, an American heiress with a notorious past and a fortune built on the vulgar steel of Pittsburgh, had just purchased a title. She had bought the oldest, most respected name in England by marrying the coldest, most desperate man in the aristocracy, Alastair, the Duke of Ashworth. They whispered that she was ruined, that her manners were appalling, and that the Duke could barely stand to look at her. What they didn't know was that her scandal was a lie, and the vulgar American practicality they mocked would be the only thing that could save them all. This is the story of how the scandalous bride, everyone rejected, became the Duchess they would do anything to know. The chill in the St. George's, Hanover Square, chapel had nothing to do with the grey London drizzle outside. It radiated directly from the groom. Alastair St. Clair, the 10th Duke of Ashworth, stood at the altar, his face a mask of aristocratic granite. He was tall, impeccably dressed, and possessed a glacial blue-eyed stare that had frozen debutantes in their tracks for a decade. He was also, as the entirety of the ton knew, hopelessly bankrupt. His ancestral home, Blackwood Manor, a sprawling edifice in the countryside, was crumbling. The roof leaked, the lands were fallow, and the creditors were circling. He needed a miracle, and that miracle was now walking toward him. Seraphina Sarah. Monroe was not a miracle of beauty, at least not in the English sense. She was not a pale, fragile rose. She was vibrant, with intelligent, whiskey-coloured eyes, a determined chin, and a figure that her Parisian-bought Worth gown did little to conceal. But her true asset was the dowry, a staggering sum that could refloat a small nation, all earned by her father's steel mills. But with the money came the scandal. Just 6 months prior, Seraphina's name had been splashed across the New York papers. An indiscretion, a ruined reputation, vague, sordid whispers of a clandestine meeting with a married man. Her family, desperate to salvage their name and make a powerful match, had shipped her and her fortune to England. Alastair didn't care about the scandal. He cared about the bank draft. This was a transaction. He was selling his title. She was buying her redemption. As she reached the altar, he did not smile. He simply extended a gloved hand, his touch as brief and cold as a snowflake. Her hand, in contrast, was warm and steady. "Do you, Alastair James, take this woman?" He looked out over the pews. He saw his mother, the Dowager Duchess Eleanor, her face a mask of pinched horror. Beside her sat Lady Beatrice Vane, the woman he should have been marrying, a blue-blooded, ice-blonde beauty who was now watching her rival with undisguised contempt. The rest of the small, joyless crowd was a sea of whispers and side-eyes. They weren't here to celebrate. They were here to witness the humiliation of the great house of Ashworth. "I will," Alastair said, his voice clipped and devoid of emotion. When it was Seraphina's turn, her American accent, though slight, cut through the heavy English silence. "I will." There was no kiss. Alastair barely brushed her cheek with his lips before turning to lead her out. The walk down the aisle was a gauntlet of silent judgment. As they passed Lady Beatrice, the woman let out a small, barely audible laugh. The carriage ride to the Duke's Mayfair townhome was suffocatingly silent. Seraphina sat opposite her new husband, hands folded in her lap. "My lord," she began. "It's your grace," he corrected her, not bothering to look up from the window. "Your grace," she corrected herself, flushing. "I had hoped we might discuss our arrangement." "The arrangement is complete, madam," Alistair said, his voice like chipped ice. You have your title. My solicitors have confirmed the transfer of funds. Blackwood Manor is no longer in danger of being seized. That is all. I see, Seraphina said, her voice small. And what is expected of me? Alistair finally turned his gaze on her. It was heavy, appraising, and utterly cold. You are expected to be the Duchess of Ashworth, which means you will be quiet, you will be discreet. You will not, under any circumstances, bring your American theatrics or your New York scandals to my family name. You will produce an heir, if possible. Beyond that, you will remain invisible. Am I understood? Seraphina felt a knot tighten in her stomach. This was worse than she had imagined. She wasn't just a wife. She was a purchase, a distasteful one. Perfectly, Your Grace, she said, lifting her chin. She would not cry. She was the daughter of a man who had forged an empire from fire and iron. She would not be broken by a cold-eyed duke. Good, he said, and turned back to the window, leaving her in the crushing silence of her new life. Blackwood Manor was not a home. It was a mausoleum. When they arrived, 2 days after the wedding, Seraphina saw it looming out of the mist-shrouded countryside. It was magnificent, a sprawling Gothic masterpiece of soaring turrets and dark stone. But it was dying. Ivy choked the windows, and the air inside was thick with the smell of damp and decay. Alistair immediately disappeared into a wing of the house he called the estate office, leaving Seraphina to the wolves, or rather, to the Dowager Duchess. Seraphina, the Dowager Eleanor said, her voice thin and sharp. She hadn't risen from her chair in the grand, cold salon. You are to be given the East Wing rooms. Seraphina knew enough to know this was a slight. The East Wing was the oldest, coldest part of the house, far from the Duchess's traditional apartments, which the Dowager clearly still occupied. Thank you, Your Grace, Seraphina said, maintaining her composure. Mrs. Davies, the housekeeper, will see to you, the Dowager continued, waving a dismissive hand. A note on the staff. They are loyal. They have served this family for generations. They are not accustomed to your particular ways. You will find they do not respond well to abruptness, or loudness, or enthusiasm. The message was clear. They serve me. They will not serve you. The next few weeks were a study in systematic isolation. The staff was polite to her face, but with a chilling deference that bordered on insolence. Her fires were never lit properly. Her tea was always lukewarm. When she asked Mrs. Davies for the household account books, she was told, His Grace the Duke handles all financial matters, madam. Alistair was a ghost. He took his meals in his study. They slept in separate wings. The only time they saw each other was at the obligatory Sunday dinner with the Dowager, a silent, tense affair, where Seraphina was treated as a piece of unfortunate but necessary furniture. The Tun was no better. When the Dowager hosted a small, mandatory gathering, the local nobility treated Seraphina with a blend of morbid curiosity and open disdain. Lady Beatrice Vane, who was visiting a nearby estate, made a point of attending. "Oh, Your Grace," Beatrice drawled, her voice dripping with false sweetness as she cornered Seraphina near a wilting potted palm. "You must find our English customs so baffling. In America, I hear it's quite normal for a woman to be seen everywhere." "We value independence, Lady Beatrice," Seraphina replied evenly, refusing to rise to the bait. "Independence, how charming. That's what you call it." Beatrice laughed, a delicate, cruel sound. She leaned closer. "Alistair simply detests forward women. He requires a wife who knows her place. You would do well to remember that. After all, you paid a great deal for your place. It would be a shame to lose it. That night, Serafina found herself alone in the vast, cold library. A fire crackled weakly in the grate. She had tried. She had worn the demure gowns. She had spoken softly. She had been invisible, just as Alistair had commanded. And for what? To be mocked in her own home. She was not invisible. She was a prisoner. A cold fury, slow and steady, began to burn beneath her fear. Her father hadn't raised her to be a victim. She looked around the library. The shelves were thick with dust. The curtains were moth-eaten. The ledgers on a side desk were haphazardly stacked. "He handles all financial matters," the housekeeper had said. From the looks of this room, he was handling them very, very badly. She had been ordered to be quiet and discreet. She had been ordered to stay out of his way. He had said nothing about reading. Pulling a heavy, dust-covered ledger from the pile, Serafina sat down. Her father had insisted she learn bookkeeping, claiming, "You can't trust a man with your money unless you know how to count it yourself." She opened the book. The first few pages were standard. Tenant rents, mostly in arrears, staff wages, household expenses. But as she dug deeper, her brow furrowed. The numbers didn't just show neglect. They showed active, structured ruin. There were massive, recurring payments to suppliers for goods that were never delivered. There were repair invoices for sections of the house that were clearly still crumbling. And then she found it. A separate, private ledger tucked beneath the others. It was filled with entries, all going to one name: A. Green, London. The sums were astronomical. They were not estate expenses. They were secret, personal, and they were bleeding the estate dry far faster than any leaking roof. She had married a man who was not just cold, but who was actively siphoning his own family's money. This wasn't just debt. This was something else. This was a lie. And for the first time since arriving in England, Serafina Munro felt something other than cold. She felt a purpose. Serafina spent 2 days in the library, cross-referencing ledgers, her mind sharp and focused. The cold and the damp faded away, replaced by the familiar click of numbers falling into place. The household accounts were a mess of incompetence, and, she suspected, theft by the staff. But the private ledger was a different beast. It was meticulous, a record of quiet panic. The payments to A. Green were draining the new dowry money as fast as it came in. She knew she couldn't stay silent. This wasn't just his family name. It was her money. It was her future. She chose her moment. It was late, past midnight. She knew Alistair was in his study. She had seen the single lamp burning through the driving rain. She didn't knock. Alistair looked up, startled as she entered. He was slumped over his desk, a glass of brandy in his hand, his face etched with exhaustion. He looked, for a moment, not like a duke, but like a trapped man. "I told you I was not to be disturbed," he said, his voice rough. "You're being robbed," Serafina said, dropping the private ledger onto his desk. It landed with a heavy, accusatory thud. Alistair's face went from exhaustion to fury in an instant. He shot to his feet. "What is the meaning of this? I gave you an order." "You gave an order to a wife you despise. I am now the Duchess who is funding this entire estate, and I am telling you, you are being robbed," Serafina said, her voice shaking but gaining strength. "Or you are robbing yourself. These payments to A. Green. Who is he?" "That is my business, madam, not yours," he thundered, his hands clenching. "It became my business when my dowry began paying for it," she retorted, her American bluntness coming to the fore. "I have gone through the estate books. They're a disaster. The staff is skimming. The tenants are being mismanaged. But this is different. This is a deliberate, systematic drain. This is a secret. And it's going to sink us, Alistair. Your title and my money, all of it. It was the first time she had used his given name. It hung in the air between them. Alistair stared at her, his anger warring with a sudden, naked shock. No one spoke to him this way. Not his mother, not his creditors, and certainly not this American girl he'd been forced to marry. He saw her, really saw her, for the first time. She wasn't cowed, she was furious. And she was correct. You have no idea what you are talking about, he said, his voice dropping. But the force was gone. Then tell me, she challenged. Tell me why the Duke of Ashworth is paying tens of thousands of pounds to a moneylender in Fleet Street. Because that's who A. Green is. I had my solicitor in London make inquiries. He's a shark, Alistair. The worst kind. The blood drained from Alistair's face. She had gone behind his back. She had investigated him. He should have been incandescent with rage. Instead, he just felt tired. The decades of secrecy and shame were too heavy. He sank back into his chair and put his head in his hands. The silence in the room was broken only by the rain lashing against the windows. It was my father's, he said, his voice muffled. What was? He looked up, and the icy mask was gone. In its place was a deep, profound weariness that startled her. The debt, it wasn't the estate, not all of it. My father, the noble Duke. He was a gambler, a degenerate. He didn't just wager the estate. He wagered on stocks, on horses, on cards. He lost it all. He took loans from men like Green, at interest rates that would cripple a king. He motioned to the ledger. My father died, and the debt became mine. An honor debt. If I didn't pay it, Green would have gone to the Times. The Ashworth name would be synonymous with ruin and disgrace. I've spent 10 years selling off everything that wasn't nailed down. Paintings, furniture, my mother's jewels. When there was nothing left to sell, I sold myself. He looked at her, his eyes hollow. To you. Serafina stood frozen. This was the twist she had not seen. He wasn't a cold-hearted tyrant. He was a martyr, shackled to his own father's sins. His coldness wasn't for her. It was for the world, for the trap he was in. Alistair, she said, her voice softening. That's not an honor debt. That's extortion. It is the same thing in my world, madam. No, it's not, she said, her mind already racing. In my world, a contract signed under duress or with illegal interest rates is void. My father dealt with men like Green. They're bullies, but they're cowards. They thrive on secrecy and shame. The very things you've been giving them. He looked at her, bewildered. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting, Serafina said, pulling a chair up to the desk, that you stop trying to be a noble martyr and start acting like a businessman. You're not the Duke of Ashworth right now. You're the CIO of a failing company. And I, she said, tapping the ledger, am your new partner. Now, show me everything. Show me the real books. For a long moment, Alistair just stared. Then, slowly, he reached into a locked drawer and pulled out a different set of books, the ones hidden from the world. The fire is almost out, he murmured. Then we'll light a new one, Serafina said, and this time we'll use paper, starting with Mr. Green's illegal contracts. The study, once Alistair's prison, became their war room. For the first time, Serafina saw the man behind the title. He was intelligent, but deeply, cripplingly traditional. He saw the world in terms of honor and duty. She saw it in terms of assets and liabilities. You can't just not pay him, Alistair protested, pacing the floor as Serafina laid out her plan. I'm not suggesting we don't pay. I'm suggesting we renegotiate, Serafina countered, her pen flying across a sheet of paper. Your father's original loan was for £50,000. You've paid him nearly £300,000. The interest he's charging is illegal. My solicitor, Mr. Harding, is drawing up the papers. We are going to offer Mr. Green a one-time settlement of £20,000, or we will take him to court and expose his entire usurious operation. He'll be ruined. But the scandal... My father's name. Your father's name is already mud, Alistair. It's just quiet mud, she said, her patience thinning. Do you want to be honourable and homeless, or do you want to be practical and save Blackwood? You have to choose. He stopped pacing and looked at her, a reluctant smile touching his lips for the first time. You are terrifying, madam. I am American, Your Grace, she replied, not smiling back. We don't bow to kings, and we certainly don't bow to criminals. I am going to London tomorrow to meet with Harding, and with Mr. Green. You can't go alone, he said, aghast. A woman, meeting a man like that. I won't be alone. I'll have Mr. Harding, who is twice his size and half his age. You are needed here. We have another problem. She gestured to the other set of books, the household accounts. You're being stolen blind. The next morning, Serafina left for London, unchaperoned in the ducal carriage. The Dowager Duchess was apoplectic, but Alistair, to his mother's shock, had simply said, "The Duchess is acting on my behalf. See that her things are packed." While Serafina was in London, Alistair, armed with the notes she had made, confronted the housekeeper, Mrs. Davies, the woman who had served his mother for 40 years. He found the evidence of her kickbacks from the butcher, the baker, and the wine merchant, all documented in Serafina's neat, clear hand. Mrs. Davies was dismissed by noon, weeping and cursing the American witch. The staff was thrown into chaos. The Dowager locked herself in her rooms. For the first time in a decade, Alistair felt a sliver of control, but in the shadows, another snake was stirring. Lady Beatrice Vane had heard the rumours, the dismissal of Mrs. Davies, the Duke and his Duchess seen poring over books late into the night. Alistair was changing. He was spending time with her. Beatrice, who had been waiting patiently for the vulgar American to fail, realized she had underestimated her opponent. Serafina wasn't just a quiet, scandalous wallflower. She was a threat. Beatrice still had allies in the house. A young, impressionable housemaid, indebted to her, was a perfect source of information. And Beatrice knew exactly which rumour to plant. She didn't need to invent a new scandal. She just needed to poison the old one. When Serafina returned from London, triumphant, she found Alistair in the study. But the warmth of their new alliance was gone. He was standing by the window, his back to her, rigid as a statue. "Alistair, what is it?" she asked, her victory dying on her lips. "I met him. Green. He folded. He took the settlement. It's over, Alistair. The debt is gone." "Is that what you do?" he asked, his voice dangerously quiet as he turned to face her. "You find a man's weakness and you destroy him?" Serafina froze. I don't understand." "Your scandal in New York," he spat. "I received a letter this morning from a concerned friend. It seems the man you were caught with wasn't just a married man. He was your sister's fiancé, a wealthy, titled man. And you, desperate for a title of your own, tried to steal him. When you were caught, you played the victim, blamed him, and had your father ruin him." Serafina's blood ran cold. This was a monstrous, twisted version of the truth. "Who told you this?" she whispered. "Does it matter? Is it true?" he demanded, his eyes blazing with the old cold fire. "Did you ruin a man? Did you betray your own sister?" "No, that's not what happened." "Then what did happen, Serafina?" "I have defended you to my mother. I have upended my entire household on your word. And now I find I am married to a woman who would destroy her own family for a title. Tell me I am wrong. Tell me this is a lie." He was shouting now, the desperation and fear of the last few weeks pouring out as anger. He had allowed himself to trust her, and this was his reward. Serafina looked at the man she had just saved, the man she was, she realized with a sickening jolt, beginning to care for. And he was looking at her as if she were the lowest creature on earth. The victory over Green felt like ash in her mouth. Serafina stared at Alistair, her heart hammering against her ribs. The accusation hung in the air, thick and poisonous. This was Lady Beatrice's work. She knew it. The rumour was too precise, too cruel. "You believe them," Serafina said, her voice flat. "After what we just did. After I just saved your home. You believe the whispers of a concerned friend over me." "I believe what I see," Alistair shot back, though a flicker of doubt crossed his face. "I see a woman who, in 1 week, has dismantled my household, threatened a man in London, and taken control of my finances. A woman who, it seems, has a history of taking control." "Taking control?" Serafina repeated, a bitter laugh escaping her. "You call that taking control? I call it surviving. Something you, with your titles and your honour, know nothing about." She walked to the fireplace, gripping the cold marble mantel just to steady herself. "My sister Charlotte," Serafina began, her voice low and tight, "is not like me. She is soft. She believes in fairy tales. And a man, a baron from some minor European principality, came to New York. He was charming, he was handsome, and he was a complete fraud." Alistair remained silent, watching her. He targeted Charlotte. He preyed on her. He convinced her at 16 years old to elope with him. He didn't want her. He wanted my father's money. He was a fortune hunter. And worse, she whispered, he was already married, with a wife and children back in his principality. She turned to face him, her whiskey-coloured eyes blazing with a pain he had never seen. "I found out. I followed them. I found them at a hotel just before they left the city. I confronted him. He did not take it well. He threatened me. He threatened to ruin Charlotte, to say she had pursued him. So I made a choice." She took a deep breath. "I told him to take the money my father had already offered him as a wedding present and disappear, to never contact my sister again. In exchange, I would be the one caught. I met him, alone, in his hotel parlour. I had a newspaper reporter, a man my father trusted, discover us. I let him paint me as the Scarlet Woman, the adulteress, the ruined one. I took the fall." Alistair's face was pale. You sacrificed your own reputation? For your sister?" "I saved her life," Serafina cried, the words tearing out of her. She would have been ruined, abandoned in Europe, tied to a bigamist. My reputation was a small price to pay. My father knew the truth. He sent me here, not as a punishment, but to give me a new life. A life where the New York gossip couldn't follow me. He sent me here with a fortune, and I used it to buy a new prison. The room was deathly quiet. Alistair could barely breathe. The scandal he had despised, the ruin he had held against her, was an act of profound, selfless love. An act of honour that put his own to shame. He had been sacrificing himself for a dead man's pride. She had sacrificed herself for a living girl's future. "Serafina," he said, his voice cracking. He took a step toward her, but she flinched, holding up a hand. "No," she said, her voice breaking. "You wanted to know. Now you know. The woman you married isn't a schemer. She's a fool. A fool who thought, for just a moment, that she wasn't just a bank draft. A fool who thought she might have found a partner." She turned to leave, but Alistair moved faster than she'd ever seen him. He was in front of her, blocking the door. His face was a wreck of emotions, shame, regret, and something else. Something that looked like awe. He started, struggling for words. "I am the fool, Serafina. I have been so blinded by my own shame, my own past. I couldn't see you. I couldn't see the woman who saved her sister, and who then, for reasons I cannot comprehend, decided to save me." He reached out, not to his wife, but to the woman in front of him. His hand, no longer cold, gently touched her arm. She didn't pull away. "You are not a bank draft," he said, his voice raw. "You are the Duchess of Ashworth. You are the finest woman I have ever known, and I have been a monster to you." Serafina looked up at him, tears welling in her eyes, blurring the face of the cold Duke and revealing the broken man beneath. "What you did for your sister, that was honor, Serafina. True honor. What I have been doing is just pride." He shook his head. "Beatrice did this rumor. It has her signature all over it." "Yes," Serafina whispered. "She is not just a gossip," Alistair said, a new, hard anger entering his voice. An anger not for Serafina, but for her. She is an enemy, and she has just made a very, very powerful mistake. She attacked my wife." He didn't release her arm. "You are not my partner, Serafina. You are my Duchess, and they," he said, with a nod toward the door, "will never, ever mock you again. We have work to do, not just to save Blackwood, but to build it. Together." The change in Blackwood Manor was immediate and seismic. It began not with a grand announcement, but with a breakfast. The morning after her confession, Serafina came downstairs to find Alistair waiting for her in the grand dining room, a room they had never used. A fire roared in the hearth, and a table was set for two. "I believe," Alistair said, pulling out her chair, "it is time the Duke and Duchess took their meals together." Their alliance, forged in the study, was now a partnership. Serafina, unleashed, was a force of nature. Alistair, freed from his father's secret, was a changed man. He was still a duke, but the ice had melted, replaced by a fierce, protective resolve. "The estate is bleeding from 1,000 cuts," Serafina explained, spreading maps and ledgers across the dining table. "The tenant farms are using a 3-field system from the 15th century. The soil is exhausted. The tenants are leaving." "It is how it has always been done," Alistair said, frowning at the map. "And it's failing," she replied. "In America, we rotate crops. We use new fertilizers. We invest in machinery. We can triple the yield from the home farm in 1 year. We'll use that profit to invest in the tenant farms. We'll give them a share of the profits, not just take their rents. They'll have a reason to stay." Alistair's mother, the Dowager Duchess, was appalled. "Profit-sharing, with farmers. Alistair, it is vulgar. It is socialism." "It is survival, mother," Alistair said, his tone final. "Serafina's plans are sound. They will be implemented." But Serafina wasn't done. She pointed to a stretch of fallow land by the river. "And this is useless for farming, but it has access to the water, and it's near the new railway line." "Your point?" Alistair asked, intrigued. "My father didn't just make steel. He built mills, a small, clean wool mill. We have hundreds of sheep. Instead of selling the raw wool for pennies, we can process it, weave it. We can sell Blackwood tweed. It's branding. This was too much for the dowager. But Alistair, seeing the logic, the brilliance of it, agreed. Word spread through the county. The dollar Duchess was tearing Blackwood apart. She was consorting with farmers. She was building a factory. Lady Beatrice Vane watched with growing horror. Alistair, her Alistair, was not just being managed by this American. He was being led by her, and worse, he seemed to enjoy it. Beatrice was desperate. She still had one ally, Mr. Thorne, the estate manager, a man who had worked with Mrs. Davies to skim profits for years and who despised the new Duchess for exposing him. "She's a menace," Beatrice hissed, meeting him secretly on the road. "She is destroying the legacy of Ashworth. She must be stopped." "She's clever," Thorne grumbled. "The Duke is with her. He's different." "He's bewitched," Beatrice snapped. "You must show him how dangerous her modern ideas are. A small accident, the new mill building. It's wood, a fire, something to scare them, to show them this is not their world." Thorne, fearing for his own position, agreed. A week later, the framework for the new mill was up. Seraphina, wearing practical boots and a skirt hiked up out of the mud, was on site, directing the workmen, her voice clear and confident. Alistair stood with the architect, a look of undisguised admiration on his face. The first shout of "Fire!" came from the far side of the structure. A stack of dry timber and wool bales had been set alight. The wind was high, and the flames leaped toward the main building. The workers panicked, but Seraphina, daughter of a steel man who knew the smell of fire, did not. "Bucket brigade!" she yelled, pointing to the river. "Alistair, get the men to tear down that connecting scaffold. Create a fire break." While the men stared, frozen, she grabbed a bucket, ran to the river, and started the line herself. Alistair, snapping to attention, took command, his voice echoing with an authority he hadn't used in years. They worked side by side, covered in soot and ash. She, the Duchess, in her ruined dress. He, the Duke, his fine coat torn. They saved the main building. As the smoke cleared, Alistair found a half-burnt rag soaked in oil near where the fire began. "This was no accident," he said, his voice grim. "It was Thorne," one of the younger workmen spoke up, stepping forward. "The estate manager. I saw him, skulking near the wool bales not an hour ago. He said he was inspecting. He's been telling everyone this mill is a curse." Alistair's face was thunder. He and Seraphina marched back to the manor, covered in grime. They found Thorne in the estate office, his boots suspiciously clean, frantically trying to alter a ledger. "You," Alistair said, his voice quiet, "are dismissed, and you will be fortunate if I do not have you arrested." Thorne, seeing the game was up, crumbled. It wasn't my idea. She made me. Lady Beatrice. She said it was to save the Duke, to save the estate from her." He pointed a shaking finger at Seraphina. Alistair looked at his wife. Her face was streaked with soot, her hair falling from its pins. She looked less like a duchess and more like a warrior. He felt a surge of love so powerful it almost knocked him off his feet. "Seraphina," he said, "go and get cleaned. Put on your finest gown. We are going to a ball." "A ball? Alistair, I'm exhausted." "I know," he said, a dangerous glint in his eye. "But the Duchess of Ashworth has a debt to collect, and we are going to see Lady Beatrice." The Westerly ball was in 2 days. After Thorne's confession, a heavy, suffocating silence had fallen over Blackwood Manor. Seraphina, still in her soot-stained dress, felt the bone-deep exhaustion of the fight, the fire, and the betrayal. She had won, but she felt hollow. I should go and wash," she murmured, turning to leave the study. "No," Alistair said. His voice was quiet, but it had a new, unfamiliar quality. It wasn't the cold command of the Duke or the weary resignation of the debtor. It was the sharp, focused tone of a general before a battle. "We have won the war, Seraphina," he said, walking over to her. He gently brushed a streak of soot from her cheek with his thumb. "But we have not yet won the peace. Beatrice Vane did this. She tried to burn down your work. She tried to harm you. She did this to my wife. Alistair, what does it matter? She's exposed. We've won." "She has not been exposed," he corrected her. "Thorn has. He will go to prison, and she will distance herself, painting him as a disgruntled, mad servant. No, the Tun will see her as a victim of circumstance, and you will remain the vulgar American who is destroying Blackwood. She attacked your reputation. We are going to destroy hers, not with accusations, not with a messy public scandal. That is her weapon." "Ours," he said, a slow, dangerous smile touching his lips, "is success." He stepped back. "Go and rest. Tomorrow, we prepare. In 2 days, we are going to the Westerly Ball." "Alistair, I can't," she said, shaking her head. "Go to a ball? After this, look at me. They all hate me." "They don't hate you, Seraphina," he said, his gaze intense. "They fear you, and they are about to envy you. Now go. Rest. Your dressmaker is to arrive from London in the morning. I sent for her 3 days ago." Seraphina stared. 3 days ago? Before the fire? "I knew we would defeat Green," Alistair said simply. "I knew it was time for the Duchess of Ashworth to be properly introduced to society. The fire has merely added an element of drama." The next 48 hours were a whirlwind. The dressmaker, the famous Madame Lisette, arrived not with patterns, but with a finished gown of incandescent emerald silk. "His Grace was very specific, Your Grace," the woman murmured, her eyes wide with approval. "He said it must be the colour of new life, and the cut of a queen." On the night of the ball, Seraphina stood before the long mirror in her chambers. The dress was a masterpiece, cut in a daring new Parisian style that was elegant but undeniably modern. It shimmered under the gaslight. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "It is a dress." Alistair's voice came from the doorway. He entered, already in his evening attire. He looked every inch the Duke, but his eyes were only for her. "You are what is beautiful." He was holding a flat velvet box. "The dress is new, a new beginning, but the past, our past, must also be honoured, the parts that are worthy." He opened the box. Seraphina gasped. Lying on a bed of white satin was a riviere of diamonds, so large, so impossibly clear, they looked like captured light. The legendary Ashworth diamonds. I thought these were sold," she breathed. "My mother thought so too," Alistair said, his voice quiet. "I told her I sold them to pay a debt. But I couldn't. They were my great-grandmother's. She was a formidable woman, a builder, much like you. I hid them. I refused to let my father's shame tarnish them. I swore they would never be worn by anyone until a duchess arrived who was worthy of them. Until you." His hands were steady as he lifted the necklace. As he fastened it, his fingers brushed the skin of her neck, and a warmth spread through her that had nothing to do with the fire. He turned her to face the mirror. The woman who stared back was not the scandalous bride. She was not the dollar duchess. The fire, the soot, the fear. It was all gone. In its place was a woman of iron and silk, her whiskey-coloured eyes alight with a fire of their own, the ancient diamonds sparkling at her throat. "They will not know what hit them," Alistair murmured, offering her his arm. "Shall we, Your Grace?" "We shall, Your Grace," she replied. When the Ashworth carriage arrived at Westerly Park, the footman, catching sight of the occupants, nearly dropped his staff. He announced them with a booming, reverent voice. His Grace, the Duke of Ashworth, and Her Grace, the Duchess of Ashworth. A hush fell over the magnificent, crowded ballroom. It was not a silence of scorn. It was a silence of pure, unadulterated shock. The ton had expected the cold Duke, looking haggard and ruined. They had expected his dollar Duchess, looking either cowed or gauche. The couple that entered was not the one they expected. Alistair was not the cold Duke. He was transformed. The weary, glacial mask was gone, replaced by a look of vibrant, confident energy. He was smiling, and his eyes never left his wife's face. And Seraphina, she was a revelation. She didn't just walk, she moved, the emerald silk flowing around her. The Ashworth diamonds blazed at her throat, a clear, undeniable statement. The rumors of ruin were dead. But it was more than the dress, more than the jewels. It was her presence. She was not a cowering American. She was a duchess in her own home, on her husband's arm, and she met the collective stare of society with a calm, intelligent gaze that did not waver. Lady Westerly, the formidable hostess, was the first to move. She swept toward them, her own diamonds rattling. "Your Grace, Duchess!" she boomed, her eyes appraising Seraphina with new respect. "We are honored. You look magnificent. Both of you." "Lady Westerly," Alistair said, bowing. "Thank you for having us. May I present my Duchess? I believe you've heard of her projects." "Heard of them?" "My dear boy, my husband is beside himself. He's talking of nothing but crop rotation and wool futures. He says you," she said, turning to Seraphina, "are a revolutionary." "I am simply practical, Lady Westerly," Seraphina replied, her voice smooth and clear. "Practicality," Lady Westerly laughed. "In this county? My dear, that is revolutionary." As they moved into the room, the sea of aristocrats parted for them. The whispers that followed were no longer of scandal, but of awe. They are, the Ashworth diamonds. I thought they were gone. He looks happy. And she, my goodness, that dress is not from London. He's besotted with her. Look at the way he holds her arm. I heard the fire at Blackwood was arson, but they look like they've just won a war. They held court. They didn't need to seek anyone out. People came to them. Lord Pearson, who had once openly mocked Alistair's debt, was now congratulating him. Extraordinary, Ashworth. Simply extraordinary. A mill. Who would have thought? Must have my man speak to your wife, about her methods. Seraphina, with Alistair smiling beside her, spoke with quiet authority about yields and logistics, and the new contracts she had secured from a London textile house. She wasn't just a wife. She was a magnate. Lady Beatrice Vane watched from across the room, her fan snapping shut. This was not possible. This was not the plan. The fire was meant to break them, to send the American running back to New York, to return Alistair, chastened and ruined, to her. Instead, the fire had apparently forged them. They were a unit. And the ton, the fickle, blood-sniffing ton, was fawning over them. Over her, she was losing. No, she had already lost. Her power, her status as the county's reigning belle, was evaporating before her eyes. She had to do something. She could not, would not be made irrelevant. With a brittle smile fixed on her face, she began to walk toward them. "Ah, Beatrice," Alistair said, his voice pleasant as she approached. "How kind of you to join us." "Your Grace." "Duchess," Beatrice curtsied, her own smile painted on, her eyes darting to the diamonds. "I am so relieved to see you both. I heard there was a dreadful fire at Blackwood. Such a tragedy. for your little project." Her voice was laced with false sympathy, her implication clear. "This is what happens when you step out of your place." Serafina met her gaze. The old Serafina would have flinched. The new Duchess smiled. "Lady Beatrice, thank you for your concern. It was, as you say, dreadful," Serafina said, her voice light and clear as a bell. "But it was also clarifying. It's remarkable what one finds in the ashes. We found rot we didn't even know was there, old diseased wood that was holding back the new growth." "And now," she said, her smile widening, "it's all been cleared away." Beatrice's fan stilled. Her knuckles were white. I don't understand." "Of course you don't," Alistair said, stepping slightly in front of Serafina, a subtle, protective gesture. "The fire, while unfortunate, has allowed us to accelerate our plans. The new mill will be twice the size, and built of stone, not wood. More permanent, more secure. We found the root of the problem, you see, and we removed it. Completely." The polite, conversational tone made the threat all the more brutal. Beatrice looked from Alistair's cold, final gaze to Serafina's bright, knowing one. They knew. They weren't going to accuse her. They weren't going to give her the satisfaction of a scene. They were simply erasing her. "In fact, Lady Beatrice," Serafina added, as if struck by a new thought, "you gave me an idea. Arson is such a desperate act. It speaks of someone with no real power, don't you think? Someone who can only shriek and throw things from the shadows. Someone who can only destroy what others build." "I find," she said, tilting her head, "I much prefer building." That was the final cut. It was a perfect, public execution. Serafina hadn't just dismissed her, she had defined her. A desperate, powerless destroyer. Beatrice's face, a mask of brittle porcelain, finally cracked. A dark, ugly flush crept up her neck. She looked around and saw that everyone, Lady Westerly, Lord Pearson, the entire room, was watching. They had heard, and they were looking at her with the one thing she couldn't bear. Pity. With a choked, strangled sound, Lady Beatrice Vane turned and fled the ballroom. Her social climbing mother, seeing her daughter's public rout, hesitated for a moment, then scurried after her, her face ashen. The reign of Lady Beatrice was over, ending not with a bang, but with a quiet, devastating whisper. Alistair turned to his wife. The orchestra, as if on cue, struck up a new, sweeping waltz. "May I have this dance?" he asked, his voice low and full of an emotion that made her heart leap. "Serafina?" "You may, Alistair," she smiled. He led her onto the floor, and as he took her in his arms, the last of the ice around his heart melted for good. They moved as one. They were not a transaction. They were not an arrangement. They were a team. "I love you," he murmured against her hair, so only she could hear. "You have saved me, Serafina. In every way a man can be saved." "And I love you," she whispered back, her head resting against his shoulder. "We saved each other." Around them, the whispers began again, but now they were the whispers of envy. "She is extraordinary. That, my friend, is what a true Duchess looks like. The scandalous bride. My God, we were fools. She's the envy of us all." 2 years later, the Tatler story was not just a feature, it was a legend. The Blackwood miracle was the talk of England. But the real celebration was not in the pages of a London magazine. It was at Blackwood itself, on a crisp autumn day. The new mill, a magnificent, clean structure of pale stone, was opening. The entire county was there. But this was not a society ball. The guests of honor were the workers, the tenant farmers and their families. Seraphina, glowing and 8 months pregnant with the heir, stood beside Alistair. Even the Dowager Duchess Eleanor was there. She approached Seraphina, her back as straight as ever, but her eyes, for the first time, were soft. "The house is warm again, Seraphina," the Dowager said quietly, placing a frail, gloved hand on Seraphina's arm. You have done well. My son, I have not seen him happy since he was a boy. You have brought back the light." It was, from Eleanor, the highest praise imaginable. Alistair stepped onto the platform to speak. He thanked the workers. He thanked the architect. And then he turned to his wife. "For a decade," he said, his voice echoing in the clear air, "this estate was my burden. I was a ghost in my own home, bound by the past, by shame and by duty. I believed honor meant preserving the ashes of what was. My wife," he said, reaching for her hand and drawing her to his side, "the Duchess of Ashworth, taught me that true honor lies in building a future. She saw value where I saw only ruin. She saw potential where I saw only debt." He held her hand up for all to see. "This mill is not mine. It is hers. This prosperity is hers. Blackwood is not just saved, it is reborn. And so," he said, his voice thick with emotion as he lifted her hand to his lips, "am I." The cheer that went up from the crowd was deafening. Seraphina Monroe, the scandalous bride everyone rejected, leaned into her husband's embrace. She was the woman who had bought a title, only to discover she had the strength to redefine it. She was the woman they had all tried to break. And she was, in the end, the Duchess they would forever envy. And so, Seraphina, the scandalous American, proved that true nobility isn't about bloodlines or titles. It's about resilience, intelligence, and the courage to build something new from the ruins of the past. She came to England looking for an escape and found an empire. The Duke, who sought only her money, found a love that rebuilt his entire world. The society that mocked her now scrambles for her approval, proving that the brightest jewels are often the ones found in the rough. What did you think of Seraphina's ultimate triumph? Do you believe Lady Beatrice got what she deserved, or should she have been more publicly exposed? Let me know your favorite part of the story in the comments below. Your thoughts and engagement truly help this channel grow. And if you loved Seraphina's journey from outcast to icon, please show your support by hitting that like button, sharing this video with a friend who loves a good comeback story, and subscribing for more stories of karma, love, and sweet, sweet revenge. We'll see you in the next one.